So it turns out maybe games journalism is not built for what happened today. I'm referring, of course, to hackers releasing a whole bunch of data from Insomniac Games. Now, this has been reported as a leak, including by me on my other channel, Fan to Deck. But calling it a leak may just be softballing, all right? Because this isn't just a leak. These hackers tried to pressure and extort Sony and Insomniac so that Sony would give them $2 million in exchange for not releasing this data. And this data doesn't just include release schedules and marketing materials and budgets and things like that, but it also includes personal information as well as assets from games that are still in development. So yeah, calling it a hack or a leak is not being clear enough. And, to be fair, I wasn't clear enough in my video. What has happened since that leak this morning, however, is there has been a debate raging on the internet about whether or not any of this data should be covered, how in depth it should be covered in, and what are the next steps, and is there any favoritism going on in video game journalism? And the whole thing has been a little confusing for me because for the first time, or maybe the first time in a long time, I find myself at odds with game developers and established game journalists. And you have to understand, these are people that I respect greatly. I respect them now. So I'm not trying to shit on them or anything like that. In fact, what it did is it gave me the opportunity for me to look in the mirror and understand, did I step over the line with my video? And in thinking about it, I don't think that I did. But honestly, that video only got viewed by a couple thousand people. I think it's way more interesting to think about this from a broader perspective and just take me out of this altogether. So all day, in any free time that I've had, I've been watching and sort of studying the reaction to not just the actual hack, ransomware, and the leaks that were the result of that, but also the reaction to the reporting of that. And then the thing that got me to making this video is I saw an article on Aftermath.site by Riley McLeod, and it's titled, "The Insomniac Hack Reveals the Ugly Truth of Video Game Hype." And the subheading is "The Games Journalist Debate Over Covering the Hack is a Look in the Mirror." And I read this and it really captured my feelings on the subject. So it's something that I wanted to talk about. By the way, I've been meaning to check out Aftermath.site for a while. This is the first time that I've had the actual opportunity to do so. The founders are people that I respect greatly, like Nathan Grayson and Gita Jackson. So in a day where I've been whiplashed, right, because I've been seeing all of these game journalists and developers kind of arguing a stance that is against mine, it was refreshing to see these people that I do respect sort of have the same opinion that I do. So let's talk about that, because really, Riley did a wonderful job of capturing the nuance in this debate. Riley opens by giving the context around what happened, but also similar hacks in the past, like CDPR having a ransom attack in 2021, Rockstar with the GTA 6 leak in 2022, and he didn't mention it, but another one that's been referenced is the Capcom leak from 2020, which was very much reported on in that time. He goes on to mention several people in the games industry expressing sympathy for their peers that, as he put it, had a very, very bad day. He says that beyond that, quote, "Games journalists and players are debating what to do about the hack data itself. I've seen folks admonish journalists and creators not to report on or make content about the hacked information, and other journalists and creators vow to not cover it." He goes on, "It's a complicated issue. There's information people want to know, and you can do your job as a journalist by giving it to them. If your work exists in the ad-based space, there's also value to the company you work for, and thus to you to share information lots of people will click on." He then gives a good counterpoint offered by game developer journalist Bryant Francis, who pointed out whatever knowledge people gain about Sony's business or upcoming games comes with a high price for the people that make them. And this is where it's good to maybe take a moment and state the obvious. And I think that's why Riley comments in the next paragraph that the fact that Insomniac's hacked information was released today is morally unambiguous news. I think virtually all of you watching would agree that what the hackers actually did is beyond reproach. But of course, it's not the hackers' ethics that are in question. It's about whether or not the contents of the hack are worth reporting on. And of course, I think most people involved, including myself, agree that personally identifiable information and assets of games that are still in development are completely off limits. So when we're talking about whether or not the contents of the hack are worth reporting on, we're talking about those release schedules, those budgets, those sales figures, things like that. And this is where Riley sets up his thesis. He says, upcoming games and what's in them is news in the games beat because the games industry is fervently future-looking but obsessed with secrecy about that future. PR and marketing departments carefully control the flow of information, conditioning journalists and players alike toward hype. The future has value in this space, a fact that hackers were gambling on by hoping Sony would pay to keep control of that future. Many games journalists know the value of that future too because they prop it up or benefit from it, even when it starts to muddy the waters between journalism and marketing. So is the content worth reporting on? I think the answer is inherently yes, right? If this was provided to us by a PR or marketing team, we would all agree that this is worth reporting on. And in fact, it would border towards marketing and PR rather than being actual journalism and reporting on the news. So why is it different today? Well, Riley says, on days like today, when information doesn't follow the established channel of PR to journalists to readers, all of us find the artifice laid bare. If how an upcoming game looks is important and worth reporting on, then isn't that true even when we're not given permission to say so by PR departments? Now, I've already read half of this piece, so I'm not going to continue to read it except for the last piece because I think it is important. He says people, whether that's developers, journalists, or players and readers, will always matter more than what's in a video game and the coffers that information fattens, whether those coffers belong to hackers or corporations. If that's true today, it can be true tomorrow. So obviously, I've read a lot from this article here out to you in this video, and so I want to say it is worthwhile to read it yourself. I think this is very well written and well put together, and he leaves it a little bit ambiguous, but the takeaway that I have is that we've definitely reached a crossroad with this scenario because, as I mentioned, a lot of leaks have been reported on in the past, whether it's Capcom in 2020, GTA 6 earlier last year, or the CDPR ransom attack in 2021. It's only this time that there was a really hard stance against not reporting on this data. And so I think the circumstances around this specific data dump have caused journalists to really look in the mirror and think about where they stand as it regards to reporting on leaks. And so there are at least two possible reasons that this time was different than other times. One of them, a more cynical read, is that journalists have friends at Insomniac or friends at Sony, and that may not have been as true for these games journalists when it comes to Microsoft or Capcom. And that's the cynical read. Maybe a more reasonable read is that this is a complex subject, and the situation around this hack sounds maybe even more severe than previous hacks, and that has caused folks to reconsider their stance. I think the truth is maybe somewhere in the middle of those two takes. Given that, I present you with another read along. This is a tweet from Tom Warren. He says, the Insomniac hack might be a turning point for how we think about games leaks in the media, dev community, and fan base. We've seen similar hacks in the past, most notably with Capcom and the GTA 6 leaks. These were widely covered without the types of editorial decisions and discussions we're seeing today. Something clearly feels different this time around, and I think it's because it's Insomniac. They're beloved developers that create awesome games, and there's a very real emotional attachment to that, and a desire from many to not harm them. I think that's understandable from fellow developers and even journalists. We're all human after all. A hacking feels far more intrusive than someone finding your marketing materials early. We are all learning from the industry discussions and editorial decisions being made here. I hope it's a useful and lasting dialogue for when this inevitably happens again to another game studio in the future." End quote. So I think the thing here is that what Tom is positing is that this really is a tidal wave of change that is occurring. Maybe it is occurring because these people are their friends or because we really like Insomniac, but the crux of what Tom is saying is that even if that's true, this will cause a industry-wide change when it comes to games journalism, where folks are going to reconsider how they are addressing hacks, leaks, data dumps from here on out. So let me know where you stand. I think I've made it clear where I fall on this, which is that I do think that there are parts of this data dump that are worth reporting on. And I think it's completely normal for a games journalist to do that reporting. Now, I don't consider myself a games journalist, but even so, I don't think that absolves me of ethical responsibilities. So that's what I think. But what do you think of all this? Do you think that this stuff should not be covered whatsoever? Or do you think that there's wiggle room to talk about some of these things? Let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like and a sub. I will see you next time.